Hey folks, here at osmediaextras.com. You're watching our retro review part 1, just a basic hardware tour first, of the Toshiba Satellite 4020CDT 13.3-inch laptop computer that was released in 1998, which is such a long time back. And this device actually was running on Windows 95, which is one of the older versions, of course, of the modern Windows operating system. And back then, it was one of the top-of-the-line laptops, believe it or not, and it only had a 300 megahertz Pentium 2 processor, which is actually middle of the class, you might consider, but back then it was actually top of the line, like we stated. And the device actually came installed with 64 megabytes of memory for the RAM, and it had a 66.4 gigabyte hard drive for the memory and storage. And of course, because back then it was only Windows 95, the actual capacity for the OS that required storage on the hard drive was way more limited than you get on Windows 8 or Windows 7 and the modern operating systems, which require something like 5 or 10 gigabytes to install to the extreme. And these devices just take such a little bit of memory to be installed on a computer and still be up and running relatively smoothly. When the device was first released, it had a retail price tag of around $3,000, which is extremely expensive, you might think, but back then it was, again, actually pretty one of the more affordable laptops with the specs that was out there. And as part of this Toshiba Satellite lineup, it also offered a pretty quality construction, build, and design that people, again, pretty much appreciated. The device doesn't have any wireless options that we are too familiar with, in modern standards. It has infrared ports for some wireless communications with PDAs and Pocket PCs, and it does have a 56 kilobits per second modem, so you can connect to the Ethernet port for web browsing with Internet Explorer, but it doesn't have built-in Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or the such. But again, it has a 13.3-inch LCD display with a standard resolution at the time, which is not bad, but again, it's not HD quality or anything like that. Of course, a few weeks ago, actually, we reviewed a Windows 95 Toshiba laptop, and that was a different laptop from this. It's actually a little bit thicker and chunkier, and if you're interested, I'll post a link in the descriptions below. But in that video, we actually went ahead and also saw the OS installed on Windows 95, which was, again, quite antiquated in many senses, but it was still up running and pretty smoothly for most basic applications, which is kind of astonishing. Just shows that Windows hasn't really evolved dramatically over the years, except for Windows 8, which is, again, a lot different from past versions. Taking a look, the Satellite has a gray plastic construction. It's pretty solid, has a little bit of a flimsy cover on the front here, which I'm not really sure why. There's a flip cover design. Again, you can flip it up to reveal the screen and the QWERTY keyboard on the inside, and it snaps into place like so. It's quite thick by today's standards and quite heavy, but it's still relatively portable in terms of the footprint because it has a 13.3-inch screen instead of something like a 15.6-inch screen. So it's easy to put in terms of if you just look at like this, but it's still very thick and chunky. The left-hand edge of the device composes of a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, a volume-dedicated slider. You have a dedicated output for the microphone, which it does not come included with, and also another port for a built-in headset. So there's a dual port there. There's also a security lock for the laptop itself, in addition to a power on and off switch, which you can also lock down like so to slide up and down to reveal the button and to prevent it from catching dust, which is a nice feature. The back of the unit is where all the ports are contained, and they correspond to the 12-volt, the 16-volt proprietary charger that the Toshiba device actually utilizes, a serial connector for older computer accessories like mouses and laptop keyboards, but the device also came with a USB 1.0 port, which was advanced at its time and allows you to connect to more modern-day accessories that require a USB connection. There's also the aforementioned infrared port and a spinning drive for the fan and the speed. Speaking of, this device is quite a noisy computer by today's standards, and it's quite loud, especially if you're doing too many applications at the same time, like word processing and browsing the web, and it's going to kick up the fan and you really can't hear anything, past the room, which is, expected at the time, but pretty bad in today's standards. In the back, we also have a standard VGA output for connecting to external monitors, some peripheral and accessory ports created at the time by Toshiba. And on the right-hand side, we have an additional connector for the lock for the product. We have some PCMA CIA card slots. It also has a dual card slot cartridge, so it can actually store 2 in 1, which is pretty interesting. For example, right now in one of ours, we have access to a LAN PC card from 3Com, which is, again, a standard peripheral at the time, and it has this push-up button, which you can then pop out when you're not in use. Push this one out and then push it down to get the card out. And the second one is actually, let's find out, a modem blaster, which is a PCMA CMA version 0.90 by Creative Labs. This is again to increase the speed, I suppose, for browsing the web using the modem, which is again one of the more standard peripherals at the time. And I believe that you can also put in a PCMA CIA Wi-Fi card for accessing wireless options if you want to do that. The side also includes a side-loaded compact disc drive, which is a CD drive that you can actually play back basic content. You can store data on it. You can also play back video and such. Not a CD drive. There's also a built-in floppy disk reader on the unit as well. So it's pretty impressive in terms of ports for a 13.3-inch laptop, because it's small in terms of the screen, but it packs in USB ports, different serial ports, different again, 2 PCMA CIA card ports, and then we talked about both a CD drive and a floppy disk drive. So quite a lot, which kind of justifies the thickness to some extent. The front also houses some of the information for the floppy hard drive, the recharging for the battery, the indication when the computer is stinking, and the such. Here's the back of the unit, pretty large. You see some basic information. This is the hard drive, and this is the battery, which is removable. You can even purchase a spare battery on Amazon for a shockingly high price of $70. Okay, so this is kind of interesting as far as how you remove the battery is concerned. You have to slide this out, and then we can remove the entire slot after sliding this panel out, like so. And then, again, this is the battery. It's a pretty large battery. Battery life is decent, not great. 300 megahertz Pentium processor is a pretty low energy processor, especially if you aren't doing too much. So it can actually last you through, I would say, a few hours if you are using it on energy saving mode and not doing too much applications, which is, pretty impressive, I guess, at the time. Sliding the device up with access to the display. Now, a good thing about screens back then was that they are all matte and non-transflective, at least from Toshiba Satellite series. So that means that it doesn't reflect any sunlight, unlike today's super glossy LCD screens. And the benefit is you can use this outdoors, indoors, and still be able to see it without glaring. Viewing angles are also pretty good, which is, again, a benefit of this particular screen. Taking a look at the bottom of the unit, you'll notice that there is no trackpad, and that is because it uses very similar to today's modern day IBM or Lenovo ThinkPads. It uses a cursor mouse at the center for navigation of the mouse, which is the older generation devices. Satellite was also one of the more business-oriented lineup of laptops, which, as you know, a lot of business laptops tend not to have a trackpad on the bottom because it gets into the way of typing and the such, and they like to use different accessories for that. So this is, again, one of the standards at the time. The QWERTY keyboard is actually quite comfortable and large and easy to type on. It's a little bit flimsy in terms of the buttons not having too much response to them, but they are large and easy to press and tactile. We have a dedicated number row on the top, some function keys on the sides, dedicated arrow keys, nothing too fancy. You will note, however, that the keyboard does not have a Windows key on the side, which is something that is a little bit irregular even when the device was released. So that's a little bit interesting. The top also features stereo speakers, so you can listen to music in relative good volume at the time. And again, some information for the Intel processor, the device, and some basic information. And that's basically it as far as design is concerned. Pretty standard back in the day. In part 2 of this video, we're going to take a look at the OS and the performance stacked to modern computers of this very, very old Toshiba Windows 95 computer, the 4020 CDT. Thanks for watching part 1 of this retro review here at osbtxreviews.com and our brother site at OS Tech News.